My name is Margaret Collins, and tonight should have been nothing more than a celebration of the life I built. 70 years old, retired at last, and surrounded by friends and family in the backyard of my home in Seattle. String lights swayed gently above us. Laughter floated through the air, and the chilled champagne glistened in the late summer glow. I raised my glass, ready to savor the moment, when something caught my eye. Across the table, my daughter-in-law, Lila, leaned closer than she needed to. Her smile was painted on, too stiff, too deliberate. In her hand, she carried the bottle of champagne. She poured carefully, almost theatrically, into the glass she knew was mine, the one with the tiny chip along the rim. That glass had been mine for years, my favorite, the one I always reached for. And in that moment, as she set it before me, her eyes darted sideways, flickering with something I couldn't name but felt in my bones. I didn't drink, not yet. Instead, I smiled, lifted the glass halfway, and let the conversation at the table mask the storm building inside me. Lila looked at me expectantly, as if waiting to see me sip. The edges of her lipstick curled into the kind of grin people give when they believe they've won something. My chest tightened, not with joy, but with suspicion so sharp it almost took my breath away. Without a word, I shifted the glass, trading it with Donna, Lila's own mother, who sat beside me. Donna barely noticed, still laughing at a story someone was telling. She raised the chipped glass, the one that had been meant for me, and took a generous swallow. Seconds later, the laughter around the table shattered. Donna's hand trembled, her skin drained of color, and the glass slipped from her fingers. She gasped, her body jerking violently as she collapsed forward onto the table. Screams erupted, chairs scraped against the patio, and in the chaos, I saw Lila's face. Her painted smile had vanished, leaving only a flicker of panic that she tried to hide behind a trembling hand. I didn't move. I didn't cry out. I watched, because deep inside, I knew. That drink had not been meant for Donna. It had been meant for me. The sirens wailed before I even realized someone had dialed 911. Donna lay sprawled across the patio table, her lipstick smeared, her breath ragged, guests scattered, some fumbling for napkins, others crying out for help. I stood there with my empty glass in hand, the rim still cold against my palm, and forced myself to keep breathing. Daniel rushed to Donna's side, his face pale, his hands shaking as he tried to lift her upright. "Mom, hang on!" he shouted, though his eyes flicked toward me for a split second, searching, measuring. Lila knelt on the ground, pressing tissues against the foam that bubbled at her mother's lips. Tears welled in her eyes, but I could see the difference. Those weren't tears of grief. They were tears of exposure, of a plan unraveling before it had even begun. The paramedics arrived swiftly, rolling Donna onto a stretcher, checking her pulse, calling out numbers I didn't understand. I followed them to the ambulance, ignoring the murmurs behind me, the way neighbors whispered that maybe Donna had drunk too much champagne. Lila climbed into the back with her mother, clutching her hand, her face turned away from me. At the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic filled my lungs. Donna was wheeled into an emergency room, leaving us in the waiting area under the cold buzz of fluorescent lights. Daniel sat hunched forward, his elbows on his knees, rubbing his forehead. Lila paced, her heels clicking sharply against the tiles. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was grave. "She's stable for now," he said. "We found signs of poisoning, some kind of plant alkaloid, oleander, if I had to guess. She was very lucky." "Poison?" The word clanged in my ears. I kept my face composed, but inside, something dark settled in me. I glanced at Lila. Her mouth was slightly open, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted toward me again, and I caught the faintest flicker of fear. I sat back, hands folded in my lap, and let silence cover me. Outwardly, I looked like the concerned mother-in-law, the aging widow. Inwardly, I felt a steady fire catching hold. Donna had swallowed the poison, but I was the one it was meant for, and now I needed to understand why. The hours dragged in the hospital waiting room, each second heavy with a silence no one dared to break. Donna lay somewhere beyond the double doors, machines beeping steadily, while the three of us sat apart like strangers. Daniel kept tapping his foot against the linoleum, his nerves spilling into every twitch. Lila clutched her purse so tightly the leather creaked, her eyes darting toward me whenever she thought I wasn't looking. When the nurse came out again, she said Donna was stable, but would need observation. Poisoning wasn't something they saw every day, she explained gently, and they'd be running toxicology tests. I nodded, thanked her, and watched Lila's knuckles whiten around her bag. Daniel muttered, "It doesn't make sense. Who would poison Mom?" His voice cracked halfway through the sentence. I studied his face. The confusion looked genuine, but beneath it, there was something unsettled, something unsaid. I wanted to reach for him, to hold his hand like I had when he was a boy frightened by thunderstorms. But now, sitting under the harsh hospital lights, I couldn't bridge that gap. A mother knows when her child is keeping secrets, and Daniel's silence told me more than his words ever could. Lila finally spoke, her tone too polished for the moment. Maybe it was food at the party, maybe seafoody. People can get very sick from bad oysters. She looked at me as she said it, her voice straining to sound casual. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The image of her pouring champagne into that chipped glass replayed in my mind again and again, like a cruel loop I couldn't shut off. I excused myself and stepped into the corridor. The hum of vending machines filled the air, and I pressed my hand against the cool wall, steadying my breath. My chest ached, not from fear, but from betrayal. I had spent my life protecting my family, building a foundation so Daniel would never want for anything. And yet, as the night stretched on, I couldn't ignore the chilling possibility that my own flesh and blood was tangled in something darker than I had ever imagined. That night, as I drove home alone, I made myself a quiet promise. Whatever truth lay behind that poisoned glass, I would find it, and I would be ready for what came next. 3 days later, Donna finally opened her eyes, frail, pale, but alive. The doctors confirmed it. Oleander poisoning, a common ornamental plant, deadly if ingested. The police took notes, asked questions, and promised to investigate. But without proof, everything sounded like speculation. At the hospital, I held Donna's trembling hand, and she whispered that she remembered nothing after the toast. Lila hovered nearby, fussing with her hair, avoiding my gaze. When I returned home, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of unopened bills Daniel had left in my mail pile. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The numbers hit me like a slap. Credit card debt climbing past $50,000. Mortgage refinanced twice in 2 years. A second loan taken out against their house. Interest rates so steep it was practically drowning them. The picture sharpened in my mind. Lila's boutique had closed within a year of opening, yet she never gave up her taste for designer clothes, luxury cars, and lavish trips. Daniel, my son, worked as an architect, but his salary couldn't carry both their lifestyle and their mounting debts. I remembered the way they had cornered me last month. their smiles rehearsed, their voices sweet. "Mom, it's time you think about yourself." Daniel had said, "You don't need all this space. Evergreen Lodge is beautiful. Private suites, a library, even a spa. We could handle the paperwork for you. You'd be comfortable there." At the time, I brushed it off, thinking they were just misguided. But now I saw the desperation in every word. Evergreen Lodge wasn't about my comfort. It was about control. If I signed over my power of attorney, they would hold the keys to everything I had worked for, over $20 million from selling the company. My home, my accounts, my independence. The thought twisted my stomach. I had already helped them so many times, writing checks to cover tuition, bailing them out when the boutique failed, even paying off part of their mortgage. I had given and given because that's what mothers do. But this wasn't about help anymore. This was about greed, pure and venomous. Just like that champagne glass, my entire life had been marked, chipped, and set before me, waiting for me to drink without question. I closed the folder of bills, my hands steady now. If they were plotting to take everything, then I needed to make sure I had more than just suspicion. I needed protection. The morning after I sorted through their bills, I called my attorney, Robert Hayes. He had guided me through the sale of my company, and I trusted him more than anyone outside my family. His office smelled faintly of leather and old books, a place where logic ruled over sentiment. I sat across from him, my hands folded tightly, and laid everything out. The poisoned glass, Donna's collapse, the debts, the pressure to move into Evergreen Lodge. Robert didn't look surprised. His eyes narrowed with the patience of a man who had seen too many families torn apart by greed. "Margaret," he said carefully, "you need to assume they will try again. We'll update your will and trust immediately, and we'll make sure power of attorney remains firmly in your hands, no exceptions." I nodded, though my chest ached as if I were betraying Daniel by even speaking the words. But this wasn't betrayal. This was survival. That afternoon, I had a security company install cameras throughout the house. Discreet, but effective. Motion sensors at the doors. Recording stored off-site. The technician explained everything patiently, and I followed along, determined not to play the helpless old woman they expected me to be. Later, alone in the kitchen, I stared out the window at the garden Daniel had played in as a boy. I remembered him chasing fireflies in the twilight, his laughter echoing against the cedar fence. Now that same son sat across from me at dinner, letting his wife plot my removal, maybe even my death. I pressed my hands against the countertop until the granite bit into my palms. It would be easier to turn away, to pretend I hadn't seen what I saw, but I couldn't. Not when my very life and independence hung in the balance. I brewed a pot of tea and carried it to the dining table. The house silent except for the faint hum of the new security system. A strange calm settled over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control again. If Daniel and Lila thought I was fragile, they were about to learn the truth. I might have been old, but I wasn't weak, and I would prove it. 2 weeks after the party, Donna came to see me. She was thinner now, her skin still pale from her ordeal, but her eyes held a clarity I hadn't seen before. She sat at my kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, and for a long moment she just stared into the steam, as if gathering the courage to speak. Finally, she whispered, "Margaret, I need to tell you something. I think Lila tried to poison me that night." My heart thudded, though I'd already known. Still, hearing her mother admit it out loud was like having the floor tilt beneath me. Donna swallowed hard. "I saw her in the garden the morning of your party. She had a handful of oleander leaves. I asked what she was doing, and she laughed it off, said she was making a floral arrangement. But I know that plant, Margaret. I grew up in California. Oleander kills dogs, cats, even people. I should have pressed her harder. Maybe I could have stopped it. Her eyes welled with tears. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Donna, she fooled us both. But you're here, and that means something. That night, I called Robert again. I need more than paperwork, I told him. I need proof. He recommended a private investigator he trusted, a former detective named Jack Monroe. Jack arrived the next day, tall, silver-haired, with a voice like gravel. He listened as I explained everything, jotting notes without interrupting. If what you suspect is true, he said, there will be a trail. People like your daughter-in-law don't plot alone. They leave crumbs. Within a week, he had them. Copies of emails between Lila and Dr. Harvey Grant, discussing how quickly he could push through a competency evaluation, bank statements showing payments funneled to his private account, and then the sharpest cut of all, a life insurance policy taken out on me for $1 million, naming Lila as the sole beneficiary. Jack laid the papers across my dining table, one by one. I forced myself to look, even as my stomach clenched. Then he slid a final sheet forward, screenshots of text messages from Daniel to his wife. If Mom won't sign, we'll scare her. She hates hospitals. Grant will handle the rest. I stared at the words, my son's words, and felt my heart fracture in two. But the fire inside me only burned hotter. They thought they were clever. They thought I was alone. They were wrong. The documents Jack uncovered sat in a neat folder on my desk, like a stack of loaded weapons. Every page was proof of betrayal. Every line a reminder that my son had chosen greed over blood. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, my mind a battlefield of grief and fury. A mother is supposed to protect her child, but what do you do when your child becomes the one you need protecting from? The answer came to me in a moment of cold clarity. I would play their game. If Lila wanted me to sign away my life, I would give her the performance she'd been waiting for. But this time, she wouldn't be the only one with a plan. I called Daniel the next morning. My voice trembled just enough to sound believable. Sweetheart, I've been thinking. Maybe you're right. Maybe Evergreen Lodge would be best. I'm so tired. I can't manage this house alone anymore. There was silence on the line, then a rush of relief in his voice. Mom, that's wonderful. I'll tell Lila. We'll arrange everything. Within hours, Lila was on my porch, dressed immaculately in a cream blazer, her lips bright with fresh red lipstick. She carried a thick leather portfolio, her eyes gleaming. I knew you'd come around, she said, pressing my hand as if we were allies. I'll bring our lawyer over tomorrow. He'll walk you through the paperwork. I smiled faintly, pretending to be weary, nodding as though I were surrendering. The moment she left, I picked up the phone. Robert answered on the first ring. Tomorrow, I said simply. Bring them with you. He didn't ask who them was. He already knew. The next day, the air felt heavy, like the calm before a thunderstorm. I sat at the dining table, the same one where Jack had laid out the damning evidence. My favorite chipped glass rested nearby, untouched, as if reminding me of the danger I'd escaped. Daniel and Lila arrived on time, their lawyer trailing behind, Dr. Grant in a pressed suit, carrying a briefcase instead of a stethoscope. Lila spread the documents across the table, her manicured nails tapping the signature lines. Just sign here, Margaret, she said sweetly. Once it's official, you won't have to worry about a thing. I picked up the pen. My hand steady now, I let the tip hover over the page, just long enough to see the hunger in Lila's eyes. And then, before the ink touched paper, the front door burst open. 2 detectives stepped inside, Robert at their side, Jack close behind. Badges flashed. Voices rang out. And in that instant, I saw Lila's perfect smile shatter. The room froze the moment the detectives announced themselves. One of them, a tall man with sharp eyes, placed a folder on the table and began reading from a warrant. Lila's hands shot up in protest, her lipstick-smudged mouth forming words faster than her brain could catch them. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice breaking. "You can't just barge in here. Margaret invited us. We're here to help her." Detective Hayes cut her off. Help her? By convincing a physician to declare her incompetent? By funneling money into his private account? By attempting to poison her at her own retirement party? His words cracked through the air like a whip. Daniel's face drained of color. What? No, that's not what this is. His eyes darted to me, pleading. Mom, tell them. We just wanted to make sure you were safe. Lila went too far, but The detective slid photographs across the table. Printouts of text messages, copies of wire transfers, the toxicology report on the champagne glass, and then, the worst of all, Daniel's own words, scrawled in digital ink. If Mom won't sign, we'll scare her. She hates hospitals. Grant will handle the rest. Daniel's mouth opened and closed, like a boy caught lying about broken windows instead of a man conspiring against his mother. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he whispered. Lila erupted, her polished mask collapsing. Don't you dare put this all on me. Daniel, you knew. You begged me to fix our lives, and I did what had to be done. Her voice rose to a shriek, raw and jagged. The detectives moved in, cuffing her wrists as she kicked against the chair legs. Daniel stood frozen, his eyes locked on mine. For a heartbeat, I saw my little boy, the one who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares, the one I had carried through sickness and scraped knees. But that boy was gone, buried beneath the man who had helped plot my downfall. When the cuffs clicked around his wrists, he didn't fight. He just lowered his head, shame radiating off him like heat. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded, my breath steady. Inside, my heart cracked wide open, grief and vindication colliding in waves I could barely contain. As they led my son and his wife out of the house, the silence that followed was deafening. My world had shifted forever. But one truth remained. I was still standing. And tomorrow, the reckoning would begin. The trial came swiftly, though every day of it felt like a lifetime. I sat in the front row as the prosecutor laid out the case. The poisoned champagne, the emails with Dr. Grant, the life insurance policy, the text from my own son. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My tears had already been spent long before the gavel struck. Lila faced the jury with painted lips and trembling hands, her confidence gone. When the verdict was read, 15 years in state prison, she broke into sobs that echoed across the room. Daniel stood beside her, his shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on the floor. 3 years. That was his sentence. Not as long, but enough to mark him forever. As they were led away in shackles, I felt no triumph, just an aching emptiness, like mourning someone who had already died. My son was gone, not to death, but to choices he made with his own hands. In the weeks that followed, My granddaughter Ella began visiting after school. 14 years old, cautious at first, then warmer with every passing day. She apologized once, her voice breaking, though she had nothing to be sorry for. I pulled her close and told her she was my future, the reason I would keep living. Donna, too, became a constant presence. We shared dinners, church on Sundays, quiet laughter in the garden. Strange how betrayal had forged a bond neither of us expected. Now, when I walk through my home, I no longer feel fear pressing in from the walls. I feel strength. I survived, and I've learned the sweetest revenge isn't watching those who wronged you fall. It's continuing to live freely, fully, and without apology.